People often argue about whether manifestation works, or whether visualization works, or whether affirmations work, but I think they're arguing about the wrong thing. The more interesting question is, what psychological mechanism are these practices trying to activate? At their core, they all seem to be attempting the same thing. They try to create a mental representation of a desired future. If their representation becomes believable enough, it begins influencing present-day behavior. Someone who generally believes they can become fluent in Japanese is more likely to study. Someone who believes they can build a successful business is more likely to tolerate setbacks. Someone who believes healthy relationships are possible is more likely to continue meeting people after rejection. In essence, belief isn't necessarily changing reality directly, it's changing a person's orientation towards reality. The belief influences attention, persistence, decision-making, risk tolerance. Over time, those behaviors create different outcomes. So I don't think future-oriented belief is irrational. I think it's psychological mechanism. But I also think there's another mechanism that accomplishes something very similar while reducing the psychological burden. Instead of asking, can I convince myself that my future already exists? The question becomes, what's today's orientation? That single question changes the scale of the problem. Most goals are psychologically overwhelming because they're evaluated at the level of completion. Become fluent, build a successful career, find a healthy relationship, write a book, start a business. The mind immediately compares the present to the finished product. The gap feels enormous, and enormous goals are difficult to act on consistently because the reward exists somewhere in the distant future. Today's orientation changes the reference point. Instead of measuring this distance between the present and the goal, it measures whether today's behavior is pointed in the correct direction. The objective shifts from, am I there yet, to, did today's actions move me toward it? Those are fundamentally different questions. One evaluates outcomes, the other evaluates direction. That matters because direction is available every single day. Outcomes usually aren't. If someone studies Japanese for 15 minutes a day, they aren't fluent, but they are oriented towards fluency. If someone submits another job application, they don't suddenly have a new career, but they were oriented towards building one. If someone goes on a first date with someone compatible, they don't suddenly have a relationship, but they were oriented towards creating the possibility of one. The future doesn't arrive in one decision. It emerges from thousands of present-oriented decisions that accumulate over time. That's why I don't think these two approaches are actually competing philosophies. They're different psychological pathways towards sustained behavior. One pathway begins with the future belief influences present action. The other begins with the present. Present action gradually strengthens future belief. Neither necessarily requires magical thinking. Both rely on psychology. The difference is cognitive load. Holding a vivid image of a distant future can be motivating for some people, but for others, it creates an enormous gap between who they are today and who they hope to become. That gap can feel discouraging instead of motivating. Today's orientation removes that comparison entirely. It doesn't ask someone to emotionally live in the future. It asks them to identify the next behavior that is consistent with the future they want. Ironically, this may produce the same long-term outcome, not because the future is constantly being imagined, but because the present becomes consistently actionable. The future isn't built by repeatedly measuring how far away it is. It's built by repeatedly asking a much smaller question: what's today's orientation? Thanks for watching.